Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into a world where the entire Earth turns into a frozen Marby oceans locked beneath miles of ice, winds howling over glaciers that reach the equator, and not a warm breeze in sight. You're standing at the edge of what scientists call a snowball Earth. But trust me, there's nothing cozy about it. You probably won't survive this, but that's okay because you don't need to. You're just here to drift, to watch, to wonder. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I put a lot into making these nighttime stories both dreamy and just a little mind-bending. Also, let me know where you're listening from and what time it is right now. I love seeing all your sleepy corners of the world. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You float above a pale, frozen planet. The continents are unrecognizable, no, because they're in the wrong place, but because they're buried under white silence. Massive glaciers stretch all the way to the equator. Ice reflects the weak sunlight like a polished mirror, bouncing warmth away and deepening the cold. Even the oceans, those ancient, churning reservoirs of heat are sealed under a lid of ice, possibly up to a kilometer thick. You breathe in the stillness, even though there's nothing gentle about it. It's the stillness of something holding its breath, of a world waiting. And what it's waiting for, well, that's part of the mystery. This is Snowball Earth, a term that sounds almost cute until you remember that temperatures dipped far below freezing, even near the equator, and most of the planet's surface was uninhabitable. Imagine Antarctica, but it covers every shoreline. Imagine Greenland, but it wraps around the equator like a belt of doom. Scientists think this happened at least twice possibly. 3 times between 720 and 580 million years ago. That's hundreds of millions of years before the first dinosaurs, or even complex animals. Life back then mostly meant microbes, and those microbes, they were having a bad time. But let's rewind the tape, just a little. Right before the freeze, Earth was actually pretty balmy. You stroll through steaming rainforests of green slime and microbial mats in a shallow, tropical ocean. Sunlight filters through the haze. Then, one day gradually, sneakily things start to change. A series of powerful geological forces begins to stack the odds against warmth. The continents had drifted into tropical latitudes. Weathering of those continental rocks, especially fresh basalt, started pulling carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere faster than volcanoes could put it back. Less CO2 means less greenhouse effect. Less greenhouse effect means less heat trapped in the atmosphere. And when things cool, ice starts to form. And ice, being the drama queen it is, makes everything worse. This is the start of what climate scientists call a positive feedback loop. More ice means more sunlight reflected away. More reflection means more cooling. More cooling means more ice. You get the idea. Pretty soon, the loop's off the rails. You probably want to shout something helpful like, "Hey, maybe stop the ice before it gets too out of hand." But Earth's not listening. The system has tipped. The freeze is on. Somewhere in the night sky, the sun shines down like always, but its rays barely warm the surface now. Back then, the sun was fainter only about 94% of its current output. Doesn't sound like much, but it's just enough to let this icy feedback loop take over when the conditions are right. The oceans begin to freeze from the poles inward. The atmosphere becomes thinner and drier. Snow begins to fall in the tropics. Welcome to the world's most overkill winter. And it's not just one big chill. This process might have happened more than once. Some geologists argue for 2 major snowball Earth events during the Neoproterozoic era, known as the Sturtian and Marinoan glaciations. Others think there may have been a third, shorter one. Historians still argue whether these freezes were global or slush ball scenarios where equatorial regions remained partially unfrozen. Either way, the planet wasn't a fun place to be. Still, you can't help but admire the sheer silence of it all. A world paused in deep time, a planet breathing in and holding that breath. Here's a quirky little tidbit for you. Some early theories to explain glacial striations in tropical rock formations were dismissed as nonsense. Glaciers at the equator? Scientists scoffed. Impossible. Turns out nature has a weird sense of humor. Those rocks were right. And somewhere under that thick, cold surface, life is still there. Just barely. But we'll get to that soon. Tonight, you're suspended above the ice like a ghost. Everything below you is frozen, locked, waiting. Even the stars seem to twinkle a little more slowly. The moon still tugs at the oceans under the ice, but her power seems distant now. You sense the gravity of time pulling forward, but the present this icy present feels infinite. And you? You drift over it all, wrapped in a cosmic blanket of frost, listening to the Earth's cold lullaby. You descend now slowly, like a falling feather onto the surface of this frozen Earth. The ice crunches beneath your imaginary feet, even though you leave no prints. You're a quiet observer, moving through the deep freeze like a thought drifting in a dream. And what you're seeing is as strange as it is silent. It's not a cartoonish flash freeze or a sudden ice age out of a disaster movie. It's slower, colder, more relentless. The glaciers have taken their time, millions of years, in fact, to wrap the planet in their indifferent embrace. You move across a vast, glittering wasteland. Cracks run through the ice like lightning bolts caught in stone. The air is razor sharp and so thin your breath would catch, if you still had one. In every direction there's only white, blue, and silence. But beneath all this stillness, something else is happening. Deep underground, Earth's core is still churning. Mantle plumes rise like invisible geysers. Volcanoes bubble and grumble beneath the glaciers, trying their best to keep things spicy. And sometimes they succeed. You float above a volcanic rift heat leaking through fissures in the ice, melting small pockets of ocean below. These are known as refugia, and they might be the only reason life survives. Tiny ecosystems huddle around hydrothermal vents in the pitch-black deep sea, feeding off chemical energy instead of sunlight. These vents become the fireplaces of evolution, warm, nourishing, absolutely vital. It's a beautiful irony. The very processes that froze the planet tectonics, carbon cycles, volcanoes, also keep the tiniest sparks of life alive. Not much else moves, though. If Earth had a face, it would be numb. Now imagine the kind of life that has to survive this. We're not talking dinosaurs or trilobites, not even plants or jellyfish. This is the reign of microbes. Bacteria, archaea, and tiny eukaryotes huddle in briny brine pockets or cling to underwater rock. They're the underdogs of existence. They endure radiation, pressure, cold, and starvation. And they do it with absolutely no applause. Here's a strange historical fact. The only evidence we have for Snowball Earth comes from rocks that formed over 600 million years ago in places like Namibia, Australia, and Canada. Geologists read these rocks like bedtime stories looking for glacial dropstones, isotopic anomalies, and cap carbonates that tell of a sudden planet-wide thaw. But they're still debating the script. Historians still argue whether the glacial deposits mean total planetary freeze or if some parts of the ocean remained open, like a few cracked windows in an otherwise shut-down house. You step across the ice, moving closer to the equator. Doesn't help much. There's still snow here. In fact, Earth is likely colder at the equator during snowball Earth than Antarctica is today. There's a kind of cosmic poetry in Thathau. The warmest place on a frozen planet is still brutally cold. Above, the sky is pale and muted. Without trees, oceans, or open land to absorb heat, clouds are sparse and weak. Sunlight comes in thin, distant shafts, barely enough to cast a proper shadow. The days are dim, the nights colder still. You find yourself craving even the faintest glow of warmth. But life, stubborn as ever, persists. One of the leading theories suggests that planktonic organisms, like algae, might have survived in thin meltwater layers under the ice. Like trapped air in a sealed jar, those narrow habitats were just enough. Another theory, somewhat fringe but fascinating, suggests that during massive volcanic eruptions, brief periods of melt created temporary lakes on top of glaciers. These melt lakes may have provided sunlight and nutrients for short microbial blooms before freezing over again. Of course, none of this is proven. This is ancient guesswork stitched together from shattered rocks and isotope ratios. But the guesses are good enough that we can almost see itiny bubbles of life flickering like campfires in a winter that lasts tens of millions of years. And that brings us to a sobering realization. Time, here, doesn't work like you expect. A bad year might last a million. A brief thaw could span the rise and fall of entire mountain ranges. You're watching Earth take a cosmic nap, while its children, those little microbes, splay quietly in the corners, trying not to wake it up. Quirky side note, there's a hypothesis floating around that Earth's magnetic field may have weakened during snowball Earth events, letting in more cosmic radiation. This would have mutated the microbial survivors at a faster rate, potentially accelerating evolution once the freeze ended. Basically, imagine microbes toughing it out in icy radiation bunkers, evolving just a little faster because the universe was zapping them into new versions of themselves. As you wander through this planet-wide winter, you begin to notice something, an aching kind of beauty. The way the ice sparkles under the pale sun. The way heat sneaks through volcanic chimneys. The quiet patience of it all. Earth is waiting. Life is holding on. And deep within that stillness, you sense that something big is coming. Not soon, not yet, but eventually. Because nothing stays frozen forever. You drift now across the jagged margin where silence meets pressure, where continents creak under miles of glacial weight. It's here, in these frozen eaves of Earth's deep time, that you begin to feel the tug of change. Subtle, ancient, relentless. You find yourself hovering above what was once a shallow tropical sea, now buried beneath kilometers of ice. Beneath your feet lies one of the oldest arguments on Earth's resume. How did it get this cold in the first place? Was it a freak accident? A perfect storm of feedback loops? A planetary oopsie involving greenhouse gases? Historians still argue whether the trigger was a drop in atmospheric CO2s from intense weathering of newly uplifted mountains, or whether the sun's faint youth played a bigger role. The sun, after all, was dimmer in those days, like a sleepy apprentice just starting out. Combine that with Earth's geography's supercontinents blocking warm currents, volcanic activity messing with the atmosphere, and you've got the ingredients for a planetary freezer. But let's not lose ourselves in the chemistry. The truth is simpler and colder. Once the ice started advancing, it didn't stop. Sunlight bounced off bright white snow, cooling the planet even more. Ice spread like gossip. A few thousand years later, the oceans were crusted over like a forgotten stew in a winter cabin. Beneath the surface, though, the oceans still slosh. Picture that. A black liquid world under an icy ceiling a kilometer thick. No light, no sky, just water and pressure. And yet, even here, life persists. You peer into the deep sea, where hydrothermal vents belch mineral-rich steam into the abyss. Around them, colonies of extremophiles thrive, little weirdos who laugh in the face of heat, sulfur, and total darkness. These are your distant cousins, by the way. Every complex living thing owes its ancestry to these chemical scavengers, surviving against all odds in an upside-down hellscape. A mainstream scientific fact here. It's during this snowball Earth period, specifically around 650 to 635 million years ago, that something miraculous happens. Life doesn't just survive. It begins to get more interesting. Some of those single-celled organisms begin experimenting with cooperation. They start forming colonies, differentiating, sharing tasks. In other words, the first whispers of multicellular life. You float beside one of these microscopic pioneers. It's a simple thing, barely more than a cluster of cells, but it's beginning to specialize. Some cells handle food, others focus on protection. And all of them cling together, united by cold, pressure, and the promise of something more. This is evolution's great secret. Crisis breeds creativity. With sunlight gone and nutrients scarce, life adapts. Slowly, of course, over millions of years, but undeniably. Like a glacier carving a valley, it reshapes the future, one micro change at a time. Quirky tidbit. Some researchers suggest that early multicellular organisms may have used slime eyes, literal bio-slime toes stick together. Imagine that. The origin of complex life began with a group project held together by mucus. Evolution, ladies and gentlemen. Back on the surface, the world remains a desolate masterpiece. Icebergs the size of cities grind slowly across frozen oceans. Occasional volcanic eruptions puncture the silence with brief fireworks of lava and ash reminders that Earth is not dead, only dreaming. You pass over a rift valley, where molten rock pushes against the glacial ceiling from below. For a moment, a crack forms in the ice, letting out a plume of steam like a sigh. In that small, steamy gap, photosynthetic bacteria bloom for just a few days, feeding on the rare light and warmth before the ice seals shut again. And yes, there's still argument about that too. Scientists debate whether such thin spots in the global ice sheet actually existed, or whether the ice was so thick it blocked out all light entirely. Some propose that open patches may have lingered near volcanically active zones, or in equatorial bands, creating tiny, fragile havens for sunlight-dependent life. Either way, you can sense it now. This freeze isn't forever. Carbon dioxide from volcanic eruptions keeps building in the atmosphere. With weathering halted by the ice, Colorado Doys has no way to escape. It thickens like soup left on the stove. Soon, though, soon here means millions of years, the atmosphere will reach a tipping point. Greenhouse gases will trap more heat than the ice can reflect, and when that happens, the big melt begins. But not yet. For now, you float through a still world, beneath stars that shine icily above. The moon, unchanged and eternal, still tugs on the oceans locked below the ice. Tidal forces keep the core spinning, the mantle moving, the vents spewing. It's like the moon refuses to give up on Earth, even when it looks like the planet's given up on itself. And in this glacial slumber, the blueprints of the future are being quietly drawn. The organisms that survive this will go on to shape coral reefs, forests, insects, and eventually, well, you. But that's still hundreds of millions of years away. Right now, you watch Earth breathe slow, frozen breaths. The glaciers are still expanding. The sea is a soundless tomb, and yet there is motion. There is heat. There is life. Small. Determined. Waiting. Down in the dim belly of Earth's deep time, you float above an ancient paradox. A planet encased in deathly cold, yet rumbling quietly with life's persistent whisper. The snowball hasn't cracked yet, but the thaw is coming, and it's not going to be subtle. Volcanoes are burping CO2s into the atmosphere like a drunk bard in a crowded tavern. No one's cleaning it up. There are no forests to pull that carbon back down, no rain to scrub the skies. The usual planetary checks and balances? On vacation. So the gas builds, molecule by molecule, over millions of years until the air thickens with an invisible future. You feel it, before you see Iton, almost electric tension in the ice. A pressure that says, this can't last. And it doesn't. One day, the thaw begins not as a gentle drip, but a planetary jailbreak. The greenhouse gases have reached a tipping point, and Earth snaps out of its deep freeze like a bear waking violently from hibernation. Within a few thousand years, which is basically a blink in geologic time, the global ice cover starts to melt. Fast. Imagine glaciers miles thick collapsing into oceans that haven't seen the sky in 10 million years. The surface roars with meltwater. Ice sheets crumble like stale bread. Catastrophic floods sweep across the crust. And beneath it all, life blinks against the sudden brightness. You stand atop a newly exposed rocky slope, watching a floodplain form below. Liquid water gushes, carving out new rivers. The air thickens with moisture. Storms form where once there was silence. It's as if Earth itself is groggily remembering how to be a planet again. Mainstream fact alert. This global meltdown likely caused what's called a super greenhouse phase. Temperatures soared. Some models estimate average tropical ocean temperatures may have hit 50 degrees Celsius, 122 degrees Fahrenheit. That's not beach weather. That's literal hot tub planet. And here's where things get spicy scientifically speaking. After the Great Thaw, the world becomes a sauna. You're sweating just thinking about it. Tropical storms rampage across newly open waters. Acid rain pours as CO2 mixes with water vapor. Weather systems are like toddlers hopped up on honey cakes, unpredictable and destructive. But all that chaos, it creates opportunities. Nutrients, once locked in the ice, now flood into the oceans. This is like dumping fertilizer into a quiet garden and stepping back. Algae bloom. Plankton explode in number. Marine life has a party, and guess who's invited? You drift now beneath warm surface waters, where the first complex food chains begin to weave themselves. There's competition, predation, even cooperation. It's still microbial, but it's layered now sophisticated in a way the snowball era never allowed. Some of these tiny life forms evolve hard shells made of calcium carbonadian innovation that will one day build coral reefs and limestone cliffs. Quirky tidbit. This sudden bloom of shelled organisms is so intense, it permanently changes Earth's chemistry. Their skeletons fall to the ocean floor and create thick sediments future fossils that paleontologists millions of years later will geek out over. And the color. After a billion years of mostly gray and green goo, Earth gets its first real splash of biodiversity. You see flashes of red algae, strange purples, shimmering microbial colonies that glow under the right conditions. It's a prequel to the Cambrian explosion, and it all started because the planet overslept and then panic-thawed. Historians and scientists still argue whether this rapid shift from global freeze to sweltering heat nearly wiped life out again, or if it was the perfect crucible for evolution to speed up. Was it an extinction event or a creative renaissance? Both answers might be true. You wander through shallow lagoons warmed by a sun no longer muted by endless white. The smell of sulfur lingers faintly in the air from volcanic vents still huffing and puffing. Primitive algae blanket rocks like soggy moss. It's humid, chaotic, and weirdly beautiful. It's the kind of setting you'd expect to see on an alien planet, and in many ways, you are on one. Your planet is now Earth, the version 2.0. It's warmer, wetter, more dynamic. Weather systems swirl like dancers at a solstice feast. Lightning flashes over newly reformed oceans. Winds carry spores and dust and organic molecules across continents still bare and cracked from the glacial retreat. And those continents? They're not done moving. You see them drifting apart, slowly agonizingly so. But the supercontinent, Rodinia, which had hogged all the land during the snowball phase, is now breaking up. Cracks form, rifts open, new ocean basins appear. This rearranging of land changes ocean currents, atmospheric circulation, even nutrient distribution. It's another invitation to evolution, scribbled in the margins of shifting tectonic plates. You stand at the shore of one of these newborn oceans, watching the waves roll in. Behind you, a thin jungle of microbial mats clings to the rock. Before you, possibility stretches out in every direction, watery, humid, and humming with energy. The thaw has reset the planet. The snowball is over. But the scars remain. Some regions stay barren for millions of years. Certain lineages of life were lost forever under the ice. Others barely scrape through. But those who made it, they're the foundation for every leaf, fin, claw, and brain to come. You're watching the comeback of all comebacks. And somewhere in those warm seas, a few bold organisms are making another leap this time towards something more mobile, more aware. The future is waiting, just under the surface. The waters are alive now, not just with microbes, but with movement. You drift beside ribbons of green and blue algae, their fronds undulating like sleepy dancers in the tropical current. But there's something new here, something twitchy, experimental, full of biological ambition. Life has started to tinker. In the warmth after the thaw, evolution speeds up like a fiddler's jig. These oceans, stirred with nutrients and bathed in sunlight, become nature's biggest workshop. The once humble cells, those microbial survivors of the snowball Earth, begin trying new tricks. Division becomes differentiation. Some start working together, forming colonies where tasks are split and structure matters. One cell feeds, another moves, a third defends. Congratulations, you're witnessing the birth of multicellularity. You hover over a shallow reef shelf, barely a meter below the surface. Beneath you, tiny clusters of cells cling to one another, forming fragile bodies that shift with the waves. They're primitive, yes, but their potential is endless. Some develop stiff outer shells for protection. Others grow flagella, whipping themselves forward with frantic purpose. A few begin sensing light and dark, not quite vision, but close enough to count. Mainstream fact. This period, roughly 635 to 541 million years ago, leads directly into what's called the Ediacaran period. It's the age of the first large, soft-bodied organisms' life forms, so strange they look more like quilted pillows than anything alive today. And here's your quirky, tidbitsome Ediacaran creatures had fractal body plans. That means their structure repeated itself over and over at different scales, like a fern or a snowflake. Imagine lying on the seafloor and watching one of these weird, frond-like beings pulse gently in the current like an alien bedsheet. No head, no gut, no bones, just geometry and vibes. Historians and paleobiologists still debate whether these were animals, fungi, or an entirely extinct kingdom of life. Some think they were evolutionary experiments that went nowhere, while others argue they laid the groundwork for all animal life to come. The fossil record is patchy, frustrating, and glorious like a half-finished bedtime story. And you? You're swimming through it? Up above, the sky has cleared. The CO2 has calmed down some of it, locked away in carbonate rocks, some absorbed into the oceans. Earth is stabilizing. Seasons become more predictable. Daylight stretches longer over broad equatorial seas. It's a sleepy paradise, humid and slow, but also humming with potential. You settle into the sandy shallows of a lagoon that didn't exist 50 million years ago. Now, the water here is teeming with creatures unlike anything you've seen before. Giant microbial mats form tangled carpets on the seafloor, trapping bubbles of oxygen. Transparent jelly blobs hover just above the bottom, their gelatinous sides shimmering with pastel light. Something eel-like slips by boneless, eyeless, but undeniably aware of you. And then you see it, your first true animal. It's not impressive by modern standards, but it's a game changer. A pancake-shaped creature with a segmented body and faint, rippling cilia that help it move across the sediment. It glides silently, trailing a faint groove behind it, like a signature. It doesn't have a brain, but it knows how to go forward, and that's enough to get evolution excited. Now life starts getting organized. These strange beings divide habitats like neighborhoods. Some hug the sediment, others drift in the middle water column, and a few start burrowing digging into the ocean floor. This changes everything. By disturbing the seafloor, they introduce oxygen deeper into sediments, making way for more complex biochemistry. These are the ancient urban planners of the sea. You float through an ancient reef, watching these ecosystem pioneers squabble over microscopic turf. No drama, no battles, just slow-motion biological ambition. And yet, it feels dramatic because this is the first time the natural world has multiple layers of life, stacked and specialized. The silence down here is thick. No whale song, no snapping shrimp, no predators with jaws to bite. But that won't last. These sleepy seas are about to get a wake-up call. Remember that microbial bloom from the last section? It's still going strong. Some of those algae have evolved into seaweed-like structures, casting shadows on the ocean floor. That creates microhabitats, nooks and crannies where new species hide, feed, or spawn. Complexity begets more complexity. Evolution is like a bard who never stops improvising, riffing on the same 4 notes but inventing new melodies each time. And while everything is soft and squishy now, you can sense something sharper on the horizon. The arms race hasn't begun yet, but it's loading. Somewhere in these waters, cells are starting to form primitive nerve nets bundles of communication that might one day feel pain, or curiosity, or fear. Light-sensitive patches are becoming eyes. Muscles are getting stronger. Some cells twitch reflexively when touched. These tiny hints will become the tools of survival and competition. Scientists still puzzle over what triggered the next big step. Was it rising oxygen levels, increased ecological pressure, or just blind evolutionary luck? Whatever it was, the fuse has been lit. You rise now into moonlight shining through the surface waves, watching shadowy outlines of Ediacaran fauna pulse with the tide. It's eerie and beautiful, like a dream you're not sure you're supposed to be having. You feel the age of it all, the sleepiness of time, the weight of prehistory pressing gently on your shoulders like a lullaby. Tomorrow, the Cambrian explosion will come like a storm. But tonight, the seas rest easy. The lights come on fast. It's still Earth, still ocean, still rippling sunlight, and the gentle hush of tides, but evolution has cranked the volume. You're drifting now in the early Cambrian seas, around 541 million years ago, and life has gone full rock concert. Everything is faster, sharper, and weirder. Where just 1 chapter ago things were mostly soft and polite, Now you're surrounded by creatures with shells, spines, and jaws. Welcome to the Cambrian Explosiona time when biology said, why not try everything? You float through a reef unlike any you've seen before. Coral hasn't shown up yet, so the structures here are formed by sponges and strange reef-building microbes. But nestled in the crevices and darting through the water are things that look almost familiar. A trilobite skitters past, armored and purposeful, its many legs ticking like clockwork. Above it, a worm-like creature with flaps for swimming wiggles its way through the current, blinking, light-sensing patches along its side. Mainstream historical fact. The Cambrian explosion saw the emergence of most major animal body plans within just 20-25 million years geological blink. Every phylum you'd recognize today has roots here. Arthropods, mollusks, chordates, even ancestors of vertebrates like you. And here's your quirky tidbit. One of the strangest Cambrian creatures was Hallucigenia, a spiny noodle with legs on one side and spines on the other. Although for decades, scientists couldn't figure out which was the top. They literally reconstructed it upside down in museums. Classic mistake. Historians and paleobiologists still debate what triggered this sudden boom in diversity. Some blame the rise in oxygen. Others suggest genetic innovations like the development of Hox genes, which allow body segments to specialize. Or maybe it was just competition. Once one species got fancy, the rest had to keep up. You trail behind a creature that looks like an underwater armored pancake Wiwaxia shuffling across the seafloor, with its scale-like plates glinting in the dim light. In the distance, a predator looms. Anomalocaris, the nightmare shrimp. It's a meter-long massive for the time with compound eyes, toothy circular jaws, and two barbed feeding arms that flail like overexcited salad tongs. You don't want to be plankton right now. But here's the thing, this isn't chaos. It's opportunity. The Cambrian isn't just about predators and armor. It's about innovation. Life is testing new tools. Eyes, exoskeletons, burrowing strategies, filter feeding, jet propulsion. Imagine an inventor's workshop where every drawer pops open at once and the blueprints spill out like confetti. You swim into a kelp-like thicket, though kelp doesn't exist yet, and pause to watch a group of early chordates. These are the ancestors of everything with a backbone. They don't have bones yet, but they do have a notochord, a stiff rod that lets them move with more control. Their bodies ripple with precision as they dart through the water, sleek as little torpedoes. A distant thunderclap rolls through the deep Shawnaut sound, but seismic movement. Continental plates are drifting again, slow but steady. Oceans widen and narrow, changing currents and coastlines. These shifts create isolated lagoons and turbulent shallow laboratories for natural selection. Remember that debate from earlier, was Earth's glaciation a blessing in disguise? Well, here's the payoff. That deep freeze scrubbed the planet clean, forced survival through simplicity, and now we get complexity on overdrive. It's as if life had been holding its breath under the ice, and now it's exhaling at full force. You dive deeper now, past glowing jellies and coiled filter feeders anchored to rocks. The sunlight dims, replaced by eerie bioluminescence. Creatures blink back at you in purples and greens. Some have eyes that can detect polarized light. Others have no eyes at all, navigating by pressure and vibration. The seafloor is a mosaic of burrows, tubes, and tiny fortresses. And yet, for all this action, there's an unmistakable hush like a symphony that's just begun tuning up. You sense that this explosion is only the start. These creatures will give rise to new predators, better defenses, and ultimately, the first true ecosystems with food chains and energy pyramids. You settle in the sand, watching a cluster of Pikaia primitive chordatu wriggle along in soft unison. They're tiny, translucent, and faintly luminous, like silver ribbons. They don't know it, but they're your ancestors. Their notochords will one day become spines. Their gill slits will evolve into jaws, ears, or even lungs. They're the whisper before the roar. And above you, the currents swirl with stardust dreams. The earth has found its rhythm again: warmth, light, nutrients, motion. The catastrophe of the snowball gave way to a slow crescendo of complexity. Life didn't just survive, it leveled up. You drift upward toward the shallows, letting the sun warm your face again. The reefs below sparkle with movement, color, and the soft glint of armor. You smile. For the first time in Earth's story, survival isn't just about enduring, it's about thriving. The sea begins to whisper a new promised land. You float toward a shoreline carved by tides, waves breaking against soft, silty banks. No trees yet, no grass, no bird songs in the air, just barren rock, tide pools, and wind howling over naked stone. But something's changing. Life has tested every inch of the ocean, and now it's got wanderlust. The invasion of land is creeping closer, inch by inch, and you're just in time to witness the prelude. A thin film of green coats some of the rock's algae, the pioneer life form of continents. It clings like ancient paint, lapping at the edges of puddles left behind by the retreating sea. You kneel and look closely. Threads of microbial mats squirm in the sun, drying out, then rehydrating with each splash. It's not much, but it's the start of a revolution. Mainstream historical fact. The colonization of land began around 500 to 470 million years ago, with simple plants and fungal symbionts pushing across coastal rock. These weren't leafy trees or flowers, think liverworts, mosses, and filamentous green goo. The fringe detail? Some researchers believe fungi were among the very first true land settlers, forming mycorrhizal relationships with early plants. Imagine that. The quiet architects of forest empires were fungi, reaching into rock and sharing nutrients before plants had even figured out roots. You crouch by a shallow pool, warm in the sun. Inside it, soft-bodied worms, limpet, like grazers, and the earliest hints of arthropods venturing across wet sand. They don't stay long. This is a hostile new world. The sun's UV rays blast the surface, the atmosphere still lacks a strong ozone shield, and there's no shade. It's like trying to camp on a parking lot made of lava rock. But necessity, as ever, is the mother of invention. Life adapts. You watch as millimeter-long creatures with exoskeletons and primitive gills scoot under a damp rock. They're the first brave explorers of a dry and dangerous frontier. And what do they get for their trouble? Freedom. Fewer predators, new food sources, the chance to be the first at something. Behind you, the oceans boil with life. Coral-like reefs of tabulate and rugose corals build underwater fortresses, while armored, jawless Physiostracoderms patrol the waters like living submarines. Trilobites still dominate the seafloor, but they're starting to meet their match. Because somewhere deep in a mangrove-like estuary, you find a fish that bites back. Early-jawed fish, placoderms, have entered the scene. They're not pretty. Imagine a fish designed by a medieval blacksmith. Solid plates for faces, gnashing jaws, and a permanent scowl. These guys mean business. Suddenly, being squishy is out of fashion. Historians still argue whether jaws evolved for eating or breathing more efficiently. Either way, once they appeared, the arms race escalated fast. From that one leap came sharks, bony fish, and eventually, you. You owe your smile and your ability to chew pizzato, a Devonian fish with an overbite. Back on land, the air smells of minerals, ozone, and fresh rain. There's nothing lush yet, but it's not lifeless either. Lichens grip rocks like tiny botanical colonists. Primitive vascular plants small. Upright stems with spore capsules dot the damp soil. You pick one. It has no leaves, no flowers, just a stiff green stalk and ambition. As you walk inland, the ground softens. You step into a patch of soil, actual soil. It's crude and patchy, but it's there. Formed by centuries of microbial decay, fungal threads, and mineral breakdown, this thin layer of earth will one day feed redwoods and rice fields. For now, it's just barely enough to hold a root. And then just for a second you glimpse movement. Tiny legs, jointed segments, a silhouette scurrying under a stone. The first arthropods to truly settle the land-early millipedes and centipedes scroll across the surface, feasting on dead plant matter and bacterial films. You lean down and track their movements. They're cautious, segmented, and absurdly brave. These pioneers will pave the way for insects, spiders, and all the terrestrial dramas to come. Your feet crunch on gravel. You're walking through a landscape still forming itself, rivers carving deltas, volcanoes coughing ash into pink skies, and continents smashing together in slow-motion tectonic ballet. The first supercontinent Gondwanai beginning to take shape. And above you, a sky that's learning to breathe. The oxygen levels are rising again thanks to photosynthetic algae and plants. Clouds drift lazily overhead. Rain falls in thick, isolated curtains. Lightning forks across distant hills. With each storm, nutrients flow from land to sea and back again. A feedback loop that will shape climate and ecology for eons. You crouch by a stream, dipping your fingers in its cold trickle. Downstream, it empties into a widening estuary where fish are testing their lungs. Some fish have developed the ability to gulp air. Lobe-finned fish, like Tiktaalik, paddle through shallows with muscular fins that can prop them up briefly on mudflats. They're not walking yet, but they're thinking about it. And once those fins become legs, the world will never be the same. So here you are, on the brink of a miracle, land once sterile and Silentis stirring. The crust has softened, the air has thickened, and life, stubborn and curious, is learning to crawl from the surf and breathe the sky. You lean back against a warm rock, feeling the earth's slow exhale. This moment muddy, quiet, and mostly greenness, the hinge of a story that will soon explode into forests, footprints, and eventually, fire. But for now, the breeze is soft, the sun is low, and the land has begun to live. The forest grows up around you slowly, like a memory forming in real time. It starts small waist-high plants with no flowers, no fruits, no fragrances, just thick stalks, leathery fronds, and an unwavering need to reach for the sun. You walk through the first true forests, if you can call them that, mossy, ferny groves where the tallest thing is barely taller than you. It's a far cry from the dense canopies of the Amazon or the piney verticality of the Rockies. But these green pioneers are rewriting the planet's surface. It's the Devonian period now, around 400 million years ago, and Earth is getting good at the whole land thing. Roots dive deep into the soil, breaking down rocks, unlocking nutrients, and stabilizing landscapes. The first true trees lie copsids and cladoxylopsids lift, their spindly trunks like antennae, toward a pale blue sky. A historical fact. These early forests permanently changed Earth's climate. As plant roots pulled minerals from rocks, they accelerated chemical weathering, which in turn drew carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. That CO2's drop helped cool the planet's crucial nudge toward future ice ages. A weird detail you might not know. Some early trees didn't grow the way modern ones do. They added tissue only at the outer edges of their trunks, making them hollow inside basically, glorified biological soda straws. When they fell over, they snapped like brittle pipes. You pick your way through fallen logs and fungus-covered stumps, tracing the slow-motion drama of the first ecosystems. Arthropods are booming, now millipedes as long as your arm, scorpions the size of dinner plates, and insects with wingspans that would put a pigeon to shame. No birds yet, no mammals, no reptiles, just a world ruled by plants and bugs. You pause at the edge of a glade and spot something extraordinary. The shadow of a creature pulling itself from the water. Not a fish, not yet a frog. It's somewhere in between transitional form. Maybe Tiktaalik, with its proto-wrists and flattened skull. It blinks in the sun, lifts its torso with a groan of muscle, and drags itself an inch farther onto land than any vertebrate has ever gone before. Historians still argue whether these pioneers moved ashore to escape predators, hunt insects, or simply survive seasonal droughts. Whatever the reason, the first four-limbed vertebrate tetrapods are here. They're clumsy, gilled, and breathless. But they're walking. You follow them through a world in flux. The continents are still drifting, colliding, tearing apart. Shallow seas spread across lowlands, and inland basins fill with brackish marshes. It's a messy, marshy planet mud, ferns, fog. Perfect for amphibians, which now multiply like rumors in a medieval village. And then comes the next twist in the tale, the Carboniferous period. You step into a different forest, darker, wetter, and almost chokingly green. Towering club mosses and giant horsetails dominate the skyline, some over 100 feet tall. The air feels thick and humid, like you're inside a greenhouse made of chlorophyll. It smells of wet bark, fungal rot, and ancient pollen. Oxygen levels are soaring, reaching nearly 35%, far higher than today's 21%. That's thanks to these rampant forests exhaling all day long and locking up carbon in deepening peat swamps. Breathing here feels like sipping air from a champagne bottle light, fizzy, heady. And the bugs? Oh, you've never seen bugs like this. Meganeura dragonfly the size of a hawk glides silently overhead, giant millipedes thicker than your leg wind across the spongy floor. You wave one away absent-mindedly and it doesn't even flinch. You're not on the menu. The world feels both prehistoric and surreal, like someone left evolution on fast forward and fell asleep at the controls. You press deeper into the forest, following the squelch of damp earth underfoot. Occasionally, you stumble into clearings where amphibians bask in pools of tannin-stained water. Some look like oversized salamanders, others like strange armored lizards, but none of them have truly mastered the land yet. They still need to lay their eggs in water, and that tether keeps them half aquatic. But not for long, because somewhere in this damp chaos, eggs change everything. Not just any eggs, amniotic eggs. With watertight shells and built-in food stores, these evolutionary marvels let embryos develop without drying out. Suddenly, vertebrates don't need puddles to reproduce. Reptiles strew land vertebrates begin their quiet march. You spot one sunning itself on a rock, scales glinting in the dim light. It's small, clever-eyed, and it doesn't seem to mind the bugs. You nod to it nods back. Probably not, but we'll pretend. Back in the canopy, you notice something odd. Even though life is thriving, the sky is dimming. Volcanoes are waking up again, releasing ash and gases. Coal swamps trap so much CO2 that it begins cooling the planet once more. And like a cosmic pendulum, the warmth swings into chill. You huddle beside a steaming vent as the first signs of a new glaciation creep in. Frost clings to leaves at dawn. Snow starts to fall at high altitudes. Glaciers once again unfurl from the poles, dragging with them the curtain of another icy act. You thought the snowball Earth was bad? Well, this is the more polite Verjona polite apocalypse. Forests die back. Sea levels fall. Oxygen dips. Amphibians shrink. Giant bugs vanish. Reptiles survive, barely. And as the Carboniferous gives way to the Permian, you realize something chilling. The stage is being set for the worst mass extinction in Earth's history, but that's still a few chapters ahead. For now, the forest sighs, thick with mist and memory. Life has made landfall, climbed the trunks of trees, and taken its first trembling steps into independence. You lie on a mossy ridge, staring up into a sky made breathable by trees you've never seen, watching creatures you'll never meet, and somehow you feel at home. The forest breathes behind you as you step forward into a shifting world, one teetering between triumph and catastrophe. You've entered the Permian period now, about 299 to 252 million years ago. This is Earth's great experiment in land-based life, pushed to the edge. At first, it's a golden era. Reptiles multiply into dozens of strange forms, some flat-headed and sprawled like tired office workers, others tall and upright, inching toward something dinosaur-shaped. The supercontinent Pangaea is now fully assembled, stretching from pole to pole. It's a single landmass so vast you could walk from what would become Antarctica to Scotland if you had the time, and very sturdy shoes. But don't expect a pleasant stroll. The interior of Pangaea is mostly desert. Dry, wind-swept, sun-scorched. No shade, no seasons. Barely any rain. You squint against the glare and wrap your cloak tighter. Dust kicks up as the hot wind scours the ancient soil. The air is thinner, no oxygen has dropped, and breathing feels like sipping through a straw someone already used. A historical fact. This is the time when synapsids appear, a weird, scaly ancestors that aren't quite reptiles, not yet mammals. The most famous is Dimetrodon, a lizardy beast with a dramatic sail on its back. It looks like a rejected Pokemon, but that sail? It may have helped regulate body temperature, nature's first thermostat. You crouch behind a boulder as one lumbers past, flicking its tongue. It doesn't see you. You're not its problem. Its problem is survival in a world growing more extreme by the minute. Life is diversifying like never before. Insects invent new wings, plants develop seeds tough enough to outlast drought, and reptiles evolve into early archosaurs, distant relatives of both crocodiles and birds. The stage is set for the age of dinosaurs. But first, extinction. Because Earth is about to pull the rug out from under everyone. Historians still argue what exactly triggered it. Was it massive volcanic eruptions in what's now Siberia? Was it methane release from seafloor deposits? A drop in ocean oxygen? Or maybe a cocktail of all three? What we do know is this. Around 252 million years ago, something goes horribly wrong. The Siberian Trapsa volcanic region, the size of the United States, starts spewing lava for nearly 1 million years straight. The skies darken with ash. CO2's levels soar. Oceans turn acidic and lose their oxygen. On land, temperatures reach unbearable highs. You flee through a dying forest. Trees are blackened, rivers dry. You pass a field where scorched corpses of plants lie like fallen soldiers. Insects buzz, then vanish. The once busy air falls eerily silent. This is the Great Dying. Up to 96% of all marine species and 70% of terrestrial vertebrates vanish. Entire ecosystems collapse like poorly built sandcastles. Coral reefs dissolve. Forests shrink to patches. Even the bugs suffer one of the only mass extinctions to hit insects hard. You sit at the edge of a stagnant pool, watching a dragonfly twitch its final wing beat. Nearby, the bones of a Dicynodonton of the few synapsids toughing it out lie half buried in ash. It's a planetary reset button pressed with terrifying force. The quirky tidbit here? Some scientists propose that the acid rain during this time was strong enough to dissolve teeth. Imagine being so unlucky that not only does your world end, you can't even chew your last meal. And still, through all this, something holds on. You huddle in the dark with the survivors, tiny burrowing animals, seed ferns, hardy insects. Life doesn't stop, it just hides. It clings on in cracks, caves, and puddles, waiting out the storm. You feel their heartbeats slow with yours. When the lava stops and the skies clear, what's left isn't pretty. A scorched world, stripped of color, but it's a blank canvas. And evolution? Evolution loves a fresh start. As the Triassic dawns, the survivors begin to stretch again. Ferns reclaim the fields. New reptiles explore empty niches. A few strange newcomers emerges, small, upright, alert. You spot one nibbling a leaf. It's fast, two-legged. It blinks and scampers off into the brush. You've just met the first dinosaur. They're not giant yet, not terrifying, just opportunistic, scaly little opportunists taking advantage of an emptier world. But give them a few million years and they'll rule it. Still in this moment, you stay low, catching your breath in the smoky quiet. You've witnessed the worst extinction in Earth's history. You've felt the heat, the hunger, the hopelessness. But you've also seen what makes this planet so heartbreakingly tenacious. You hear a rustle behind you. Another synapsid, perhaps. A cousin of mammals. You smile faintly. They'll have their day too. Not yet. But soon. For now, the ashes settle. The earth exhales, and the next act prepares its stage. The Triassic dawn stretches out before you like a cautious promise, a world reborn from ash and silence, yet still raw and fragile. You step cautiously onto scorched earth, the smell of burned wood lingering like a ghost. Life is tentative, fragile, but buzzing beneath the surface, eager to burst forth again. You find yourself in a sparse woodland where patchy ferns and horsetails bravely push through the cracked soil. The air is warmer now, less hostile, but still far from comfortable, more like a slow simmer than a roaring fire. Patches of red and ochre moss cling stubbornly to blackened stones, tiny sparks of life in a still dark world. A historical fact. The Triassic is the age when the first true dinosaurs appear, small, bipedal creatures, quick on their feet, still exploring the possibilities of their new world. They haven't yet grown into the giants that will later dominate, but their evolutionary blueprint is being sketched right now. Nearby, a trio of early archosaurs patrols cautiously, their long tails flicking, their sharp eyes scanning for both prey and predator. These creatures, distant cousins to the crocodiles and birds of later eras, are experimenting with new ways to survive, moving between land and water with surprising ease. You crouch low and observe a small, feathered creature flitting nervously among the undergrowth, a quirky bit of evolutionary mischief, hinting at the feather's original use for warmth or display. Long before flight was on the menu, it looks like a tiny dragon come to life, and you can almost hear it chirp like a medieval nightingale. Historians still argue whether these early dinosaurs were the ultimate survivors of the Great Dying or simply opportunistic newcomers capitalizing on empty ecological niches. The debate dances like a candle flame flickering, mysterious, never fully settled. As you move through this tentative landscape, you notice the slow return of complexity. Insects buzz once more, dragonflies skim the still ponds, and early mammal-small, nocturnal, fur-covered creatures creep through the shadows. They remind you of the forgotten corners of history, quietly plotting their eventual rise. You pause to listen. The soft rustling of leaves, the distant cry of a reptile, the gentle ripple of water. It's a world balancing on the edge of chaos and order, uncertainty and hope. A strange feeling washes over you, as if you're witnessing the first breath of a new story, a long saga just beginning to unfold. And through it all, above the tangled canopy and beneath the red-hued sky, the moon still watches, a silent guardian in the night. The Jurassic period unfolds before you like a grand tapestry, woven in deep greens and golds, a lush, sprawling world humming with life and promise. You walk beneath towering conifers, their needles whispering secrets in the warm breeze, and the air is thick with the scent of damp earth and resin. The skies overhead are streaked with pterosaurs, wings casting fleeting shadows across the ferns and cycads below, while the distant rumble of massive footsteps vibrates through the ground. A well-known fact. The Jurassic saw the rise of gigantic sauropods, those colossal long-necked dinosaurs whose sheer size reshaped the landscape itself. These gentle giants roam in slow-moving herds, their necks stretching like living towers to nibble on the treetops. They are the peaceful monarchs of this verdant kingdom, though not without rivals lurking in the shadows. Not far off, you spot a pack of agile theropods, sleek and sharp-toothed, coordinating a hunt with calculated precision, their amber eyes gleaming with primal cunning. They remind you a bit of medieval hunters in russet cloaks, stalking through the forest in silence, iron-tipped spears replaced here by razor-sharp claws and teeth. A quirky tidbit. Some scientists suggest that the colors of these dinosaurs' vivid reds, deep indigos, and even iridescent teals may have played roles in courtship or camouflage, like a medieval knight's crest fluttering boldly on a battlefield. Imagine a display as dramatic as a royal tournament, but in feathers or scales instead of banners. Historians still argue whether these creatures were cold-blooded beasts or warm-blooded predators with high metabolisms, an ancient debate that keeps paleontologists busy arguing over fossils and feather impressions as if we're disputing the legitimacy of a throne. You wander toward a shimmering lake, its surface like polished obsidian, reflecting the gold-trimmed clouds and the shell-gilded edges of the surrounding foliage. Here, strange amphibians croak and splash, ancient ancestors of frogs and salamanders, their slick skin gleaming under the sun. The air hums with insects, dragonflies the size of small birds darting in jerky medieval manuscript-like movements, while beneath the water's surface, armored fish glide like living shields, their scales catching the light in bursts of blue and russet. As dusk falls, the moon rises, a soft silver crescent illuminating the world with gentle light, casting gilded flourishes across the sky, and reminding you once more of the eternal dance between Earth and its silent partner. You settle down on a moss-covered stone, feeling the pulse of life thrum through the forest, and wonder what other stories these ancient lands might yet whisper to those who listen closely. The warm Jurassic twilight fades slowly, and you find yourself drifting into the Cretaceous period, where the world brims with both familiar giants and new, dazzling surprises. The forests here are dense and tangled, with flowering plantangiosperms bursting into color like miniature tapestries stitched with saffron and teal threads. The air buzzes with unfamiliar insects, their delicate wings shimmering under the gilded moonlight, and the scent of blooming blossoms mingles with the earthy aroma of moss and fallen leaves. A well-known fact. The Cretaceous is famous for the dramatic rise of flowering plants, transforming ecosystems and offering new sources of food and shelter, forever changing the dance of life. These blooms attract buzzing insects and curious small reptiles, weaving a rich, complex web that even the most cunning predators cannot unravel easily. You glimpse a fierce confrontation between a mighty Tyrannosaurus rex, whose russet scales glint faintly in the moonlight, and a herd of armored ankylosaurs, their bodies protected by shell-gold spiked armor like knights in ornate battle gear. The clash is fierce but brief, a reminder that survival is never guaranteed, even for the mightiest. A quirky tidbit. Recent studies suggest some dinosaurs may have sported feathers not just for warmth, but as display flags brightly colored plumes waving in the prehistoric wind, like noble banners at a medieval joust. Imagine a T-Rex showing off a dazzling teal crest to intimidate rivals or attract mates nature's own version of a grand tournament. Historians and scientists still debate whether the meteor strike that ended the Cretaceous was the sole cause of the dinosaurs' extinction, or if volcanic eruptions and shifting climates played equally deadly roles, an epic mystery that continues to fuel scholarly fires. You wander to the edge of a vast inland sea, its waters dark and still beneath a sky brushed with soft shell-gold stars. Here, mighty mosasaurs patrol the depth like royal guardians, their sleek bodies slicing through the waves with effortless grace. Above, pterosaurs wheel and dive, their membranous wings catching the moon's glow in delicate golden filigree. As night deepens, the world feels vast and ancient, a place where every shadow holds a story, every rustle a secret whispered through time. You feel the steady pull of the moon again, a celestial lullaby guiding the eternal rhythm of life, death, and rebirth. You settle on a smooth stone, wrapped in the cool night air, and listen closely to the timeless tale unfolding beneath the stars. The night's hush carries you forward into the Paleogene period, where the world is waking from the deep silence of extinction and blooming anew. You find yourself amid lush, early forests, where towering trees, some cloaked in indigo leaves, stand like ancient sentinels guarding secrets older than memory. The air is thick with the scent of wet earth and fresh growth, mingling with the distant calls of creatures just beginning to explore this reborn landscape. A well-known fact. After the mass extinction that ended the age of dinosaurs, mammals began their slow, steady rise, diversifying into forms that would eventually dominate Earth's ecosystems. This time marked a turning point, a quiet yet profound shift toward the world you recognize today. You observe a small, shrew-like creature darting between ferns, its russet fur almost glowing in the moonlight. Nearby, a massive flightless bird, a prehistoric relative of the moa, stamps the ground, a silent guardian of the forest floor. The contrast between these tiny survivors and their enormous extinct predecessors speaks to nature's endless capacity for adaptation. A quirky tidbit. Some early mammals are believed to have evolved nocturnal habits to avoid daytime predators, turning the night into their kingdom, much like your own quiet vigil under the stars. Historians still argue whether this mammalian rise was a slow inevitability or a rapid burst triggered by the sudden absence of dinosaurs, a debate that colors our understanding of evolution's grand tapestry. Across a sparkling river, you glimpse the first ancestors of whales, tiny creatures venturing cautiously into the water, their movements a tentative dance between land and sea. Above, early primates leap gracefully from branch to branch, their teal eyes gleaming with curiosity and promise. The moon, steadfast in its watch, casts silver threads across the landscape, weaving a tapestry of light and shadow that cradles this fragile new world. You breathe deeply, feeling the pulse of life and time stretching endlessly ahead, a soft lullaby to carry you deeper into rest. As your eyes grow heavier, you drift into the era of ice ages, where colossal glaciers crawl across the land like slow-moving giants cloaked in white. The world is locked in a frosty embrace, snowflakes sparkling like tiny gems against a steel-gray sky. You stand at the edge of a vast tundra, the cold biting your cheeks despite your layered russet cloak, and watch woolly mammoths lumber across the frozen plains, their curved tusks gleaming faintly in the pale daylight. A well-known fact: during these ice ages, vast sheets of ice covered much of North America and Europe, reshaping the planet's surface and forcing species to adapt or retreat. This brutal freeze was punctuated by warmer interglacial periods, a cycle that repeated many times over millennia. Nearby, a small band of humans huddle around a flickering fire, their teal and saffron tunics a splash of color against the monochrome world. They cradle wooden bowls and iron fire tongs, sharing stories and warmth while the wind howls outside their stone shelter. Their breath clouds the cold air, a visible thread connecting them to you across time. A quirky tidbit: some scholars suggest that these Ice Age humans may have used fermented berry drinks to stave off the endless chill, an early happy hour to keep spirits warm. Historians still argue whether climate shifts or human ingenuity played a bigger role in the survival and spread of these hardy peoples, a debate as frosty as the landscapes they inhabited. You sense the deep connection between Earth and Moon, more keenly hear the lunar pull, sculpting tides even beneath layers of ice, guiding animal migrations, and perhaps even influencing the rhythms of those flickering fires. As your breath slows, your mind softens like snow, melting into a quiet stream, and you sink gently into the lullaby of glaciers and stars, the eternal dance of cold and warmth, dark and light, wrapping you in a soothing embrace. The frozen world begins to thaw, glaciers retreating like slow sighs across the landscape, revealing a reborn Earth eager to burst into color and life once more. You walk through meadows carpeted in indigo and saffron wildflowers, the air rich with the scent of damp earth and fresh beginnings. A warm harvest sun casts long shadows over wooden baskets brimming with berries and nuts, while a wooden bucket rests nearby, forgotten in the gentle bustle of a gathering village. Around you, humans clad in russet and teal tunics celebrate the return of longer days, their laughter mingling with the chirping of birds and the rustle of leaves life's grand symphony after the silence of ice. A well-known fact: the end of the last ice age about 11,700 years ago ushered in the Holocene epoch, marking the dawn of human agriculture, permanent settlements, and the slow shaping of civilization itself. This climate shift allowed forests to spread and animals to flourish once again. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some scientists propose that the meltwaters from retreating glaciers may have triggered sudden changes in ocean currents, causing rapid climate fluctuations that tested human resilience and creativity. Think of it as Earth's own mood swings. Historians still argue whether these environmental changes or cultural innovation most propelled humanity into the modern age, a question that echoes through archaeological halls and fireside debates alike. As twilight deepens, the moon rises above the horizon, its silver face a timeless witness to the cycles of freeze and thaw, death and rebirth, shadow and light. Its gentle glow weaves through your thoughts, a quiet reminder that every ending folds seamlessly into a new beginning. Your body relaxes fully now, your mind drifting like a leaf on a slow stream, carried on the cosmic rhythm of tides and time. The lullaby of earth and moon hums softly, a soothing song that wraps you in peace as you slip effortlessly toward rest. Sleep well. Dream gently. Tomorrow will come with the soft promise of a new tide, a new dawn, and another step in the eternal dance.
Terima kasih selalu ada, entah pernah